Hello again, everyone, and welcome back. I hope you managed to grab a drink and a stretch and a wander around there as well. We're heading straight back in to our content. So we are next up. We're looking at, this is kind of where we get you to do a bit of activity as well. So this session, for the next hour, we're going to start off with some provocations from a couple of speakers to sort of get us set up, and then we're going to be setting you a bit of a task. And we'll be showing you how to get into a program called Padlet, which is effectively a kind of big post-it note wall, but digitally. And we'll be asking for your ideas feeding into how we might compile and amplify our regional programs into a really strong national program for City Nature Challenge. But before we go into all of that, we wanted to set some context, and so first up I'd like to welcome Lucy Bartlett from the Bathscape project, who has been involved in City Nature Challenge in Bath for the last couple of years, to share some of her experience of delivering activity both pre-COVID and during lockdown as well. So Lucy, over to you.
Great, thanks Matt. Let me just get my slides up. And go back to the first slide, always a good idea. Yeah, I'm from a project called Bathscape, which is a lottery-funded landscape partnership project based in Bath. We're working to protect the countryside around the city and encouraging people out to explore and to look after it. We've been going since 2017, so I started just a year before we took part in the first City Nature Challenge. So I'm just going to run through what we've done each year. It's worth saying perhaps that 2018 was a bit of a slow start. We concentrated on some promotion and some training courses as we were growing and kind of finding what we wanted to do. In 2019, we got a bit more into the groove, and we had some bug hunting and pond dipping sessions at Bath City Farm. We did some bat walks. On the right, Stu joined them there. Good gym. So we challenged them to run to one of our local parks and record as many trees as they could in a couple of hours. So that was good, because for us, it's kind of about people engagement, encouraging people out as much as it is about the recording. 2020, we had loads planned, including some school assemblies and workshops and some training. We'd got counsellors on board. I think, like a lot of people, we'd planned quite a lot of events. And then, obviously, right at the last minute, we changed all of our plans. None of our physical events went ahead, but we did participate in a live Facebook question and answer session and a video, so really encouraging people in Bath about what they could look out for over the weekend. And on the right of that slide, you can just see that we've got we did our own video of how to use iNaturalist and how to take part in the challenge, plus some social media. Just, even though data collection isn't necessarily the only thing we get out of it, I just thought it might be useful to just show how it's grown over the years. Obviously, there was a bit of a dip in April 2020, but what's been really good is, I think, in 2018 and 2019, particularly 2018, quite a lot of the observations on iNaturalist that year were around City Nature Challenge. But then over the next 3 years, it's grown, and loads more records, loads more people using iNaturalist throughout the year. Particularly good to see that people were still doing that last year, even though the City Nature Challenge weekend was actually whilst we were in lockdown. And how I know that is because on the left-hand side within iNaturalist, I've managed to draw a place which is our project area, that orange line. iNaturalist will already allow you to search by more formal borders like local authority boundaries, but that's our project area. And that's also allowed us to compare data between iNaturalist and then on the right, that's Brook, that's our local record office. So the records where we've also got a layer for our project area. And what's quite interesting about that is just people are using them in quite different ways. So whereas iNaturalist is recording a lot of common wild plants, the biggest number of records we've got in Brook is for moths for some reason. And then what we're planning for this year, we'll be updating our video. And what we really want to do is not just focus on digital content, but really try and get something out and about, even though it's unlikely that our events will go ahead. So things like what to spot posters up in some of the parks and green spaces around the area, physical trails we're exploring with QR codes, suggesting people could just stop and look at what's in the area. So that's what we're planning on. We've also got a potential with a local art gallery that's got an exhibition on biodiversity, coincidentally, at the same time. So that's the sort of thing that we're planning on doing. But I'm really looking forward to hearing what ideas everybody else has got. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Lucy. That's a great sort of whistle-stop tour of Bath's participation in the challenge. And I think a lot of the cities that have this kind of that are embedded regionally and committed to being part of the challenge will be building their own programs, and those who have participated before will have their own kind of regional programs. And I think that's a really useful kind of thing to then feed into how nationally we might connect up some of these ideas, share the ideas, and either replicate things locally or even connect things and as we're going. And that feeds into the opportunity that we have through lockdown and these activities where, having activities where we are encouraging people to go outside. We're not just doing digital content, we're also using that content to drive people out to engage with, get connected with nature on their doorstep, not just by being in a park or having a walk. We've all done more walking than we ever have this year, but actually walking with a purpose and with an activity to attach to that as well. So having a great kind of health and well-being benefit through that as well.
It's also worth saying that we've really found that people love using iNaturalist as to help them with identification. So people who are real amateurs really love it.
So kind of giving people that kind of facilitation that they would normally, at a normal event, we'd have, a person there to facilitate that. So it's kind of using that functionality. But that kind of introduces quite nicely into to welcoming Rob into share some ideas with us as well. So we are going to be, we're used to running a lot of activities which are in a local context, which are face-to-face engagement, and a lot of those options have been taken away from us and are likely to still be a challenge as we go into April this year as well. And so a lot of us have been turning towards online platforms for engagement. And so we've asked Rob Evely to join us from Bright Elm, which is an award-winning event services company who's been helping organizations to pivot onto online platforms for events as well. And we've asked Rob to share with us some of the opportunities and pitfalls, I suppose, of taking things online and where we might be able to connect up our regional programs into something more national. So I'll hand over to you, Rob.
Thanks, Matt. And you've just used my hate word of last year, which was pivot, because my philosophy is that we shouldn't try and pivot what should be live events into online. It doesn't work. We need to start thinking about creating new content and new types of events for when we are delivering online. But I won't hold it against you. That's fine.
No problem. I'll disappear and let you go.
So thank you. So I don't have. I actually have one slide today. It's just got my contact details on. When we were talking about this earlier in the week, we were thinking about, okay, how can we really consolidate the development of online content into a 10-minute talk and make this relevant for you as event planners. I come from a conference background, so I'm looking at this from a a particular emphasis, but I know that you guys will be thinking of all sorts of things about how to use events to engage people. We've all heard of Zoom bombing in the past 12 months. Sorry, not Zoom bombing, Zoom lethargy. Where we're all fed up with Zoom. I mean, it's true. We're all fed up with seeing people online. But you don't hear of Netflix apathy. And the reason being is because people choose to watch Netflix because it has engaging content. One of the biggest problems with online events is that the content isn't engaging. So if people are staring at a screen all day, they don't want in their social life or social time to have to spend more time on Zoom. So as I was thinking about this session, I came up with five key points, which I'm going to mention now, and then I'll go into each one in more detail. But it's the 5 key points that I would really like you to write down and make a note of. The first is identify the need for the event. The second is develop your audience. The third is to use accessible and compliant technology. The fourth is to measure engagement. And the fifth is to always be professional. So I'll cover each of those points in more detail. Firstly, identify the need. What problem does your event solve? If it needs to bring people together, how is it going to do that? What are its objectives? Who is it for? And who is really going to benefit from that? The success of an event doesn't necessarily come from the volume of people that attend it. It's from the it's not necessarily from the volume of people that attend that event. It's how satisfying it was to the people that attended it. And that links to developing your audience. Make it very clear in your marketing who the event is for. Are you going to ask for registration in advance? Will there be a fee attached? And how will you remind people? One of the very, very important things is people forget that free events, if they don't have any sort of value attached, and if we don't trade value for an event, we don't rate it very highly. And it doesn't generally come up very high on our list of important things to do. So we need to work harder to remind that audience to turn up on the day, particularly with online events. It's very easy to come home from work in an evening and feel, oh, I can't really be bothered to do that tonight. So what innovative things can you come up with to engage with people? Can you send them a text in advance of the event to remind them to be there? Can you send them a message via social media? Can you create a community around the event that isn't just about that one event, but about adding some extra social elements in there too? The next point is about using technology, and it's really important to use both accessible and compliant technology. There's 2 words there that I'll define more. Accessibility is, of course, about disability, but it's also about accessibility on grounds of age and ability. And when it comes to technology, it's always best to go for the simplest, least complicated software and appeal to the lowest common denominator. What I find when we are delivering online conferences is that the older the attendee or the speaker or the person that's engaging, the harder it is for them to embrace new technology. That isn't a rule of thumb. It's a trend. But it has some truth to it. So when you're selecting your technology and you're testing it, make sure you've got a good range of people looking at that from different perspectives and different learning experiences to make sure it's as accessible as possible. Also, if you're using technology, make sure that it is GDPR compliant. A good rule of thumb is that if the technology is based in Europe somewhere, it's more than likely going to be GDPR compliant. If it's based elsewhere in the States, in Asia, or India, there's a danger that it won't be GDPR compliant. So just absolutely make sure that your technology is both accessible and compliant in order for your event to have the best chance of success. Measure engagement. Keep track of everything. So note who showed, but also note who didn't show, and try and find out the reasons why they didn't show, because it would inform you. Measure engagement throughout the event as well. So if your event is an hour long, for example, a really simple tool you can have is every 5 minutes, just have a look at how many people are online. If you're more than likely to lose, maybe if your event is good, you might lose, or if your event is engaging, you might lose 5% across the course of the event. If it's not an engaging event, you'll see a massive dip at some point during the event, which will show you where you lost people. And finally, be professional. Rehearse with your technology and practice internally first. And a good tip when you're practicing is to practice with all the roles fulfilled. So host, speaker, and audience member. So you can really see how the software performs. Rehearse with your speakers as well. Have a rehearsal maybe a week in advance where you run through. You don't have to run through the whole event, but certainly run through the key points and how you're going to transition from point A to point B. Make sure speakers can be seen. Feel free to advise speakers on lighting and sound as well, and make sure you check that. There's nothing worse than having a speaker who has bad internet connection or can't be seen properly because they've got a source of light behind them, creating a shadow. And that they're speaking in a professional environment. The best environments for speakers, in order for audience members to retain focus, is to have them very much like I'm set up today. So with the webcam at eye level, with a good source of light in the face and a plain, clean background. So you're removing as many distractions as you possibly can. That is those are my 5 key points, really. I was just going to share my contact details. There you go. It's my name, my number, my email address, and the website. I know we will be sending, or my details and some follow-up information will be sent as a follow-up to this event anyway, but please feel free to contact me if you've got any questions, or you can find me on the social media channels as well.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Rob. And that was a great kind of whistle-stop tour. I know we gave you quite a challenge to kind of squeeze all of that into a very small time frame. Lucy, if you'd like to rejoin us as well briefly, I'd be I just wanted to have a quick check-in as well. I'm just going to check the chat on the side here for any questions or comments as well that people want to put forward as well. Lots of things that are coming through about the kind of iNaturalist app and how that's connected up in different ways as well. So I'm kind of trying to filter my way through some of them as well to pull out some of the more events-based activity. But what I might do is, whilst we see if a few more people can drop in, I'll get my helpers Stu and Ellie to try and pick out questions, so that I'm not scrolling back through all the very active chat trying to find the questions. Just make sure that we don't lose any. If you're both happy to just hang on for a minute while I just introduce our next our task that we're going to set everyone, so that we can put any questions to you that do jump out as well. So our next activity that we're going to do, so using what we've just heard from Lucy and Rob as a bit of inspiration and influence, we are going to look at crowdsourcing from the 90 of you that are in the room at the moment, some of initial ideas for again, referring back to this challenge of how might we kind of amplify and connect our regional programs, things like what Lucy was talking about, with to create a more kind of national program, maybe making use of the digital and online events opportunities that audiences have become more used to and part of as well, but also not limiting ourselves to digital. You know, there are options beyond digital that we can do remotely and that can cover across the UK as well. So we're going to do that with a particular format, but I can see that there's before I get Ellie to do some screen sharing to show you how we're going to do that. There are a couple of questions coming through as well. So we've got here one from Victoria Burton. That's any recommendations for measuring engagement for online events without resorting to surveys? Which, Rob, I might come to you first on that.
Yeah, I mean, the counting. The head count method works really well, as I mentioned, and you end up with a graph across the timeline of the event showing you where you lost people. You more often lost people if you're in a single event. You more often lose people. It's very rare that once you've lost them, it's rare for you to gain them again. So I think that head count is really important, but also looking at engagement in terms of the technology that you use as well, and the touch points. Most, even, programs like Zoom, for example, they will give you that management information at pro level. I think I don't think you get it with the free account, but you can also use other engagement tools. So, for example, if you point to a website, have a look at the impact. If you're pointing to a website or another resource or another technology during your event, have a look at that technology, the background of that technology afterwards, to see if your work had an impact on visitors to that website at a particular time, for example.
Fantastic. And Lucy, is there anything that you've kind of picked up through your experience as well for some of that measurement of engagement as well?
I think the data I showed of the use of iNaturalist is one measure that's quite useful for us, just to see that going up year by year. We wouldn't claim to take credit for that, of course, but I think it's just showing that City Nature Challenge itself has probably raised the profile of iNaturalist. Yeah, otherwise it's number of people that come to the events and that sort of thing, and through social media.
And I think that's actually sort of talking about the online and things like social media as well. That kind of links a little bit to a question from Joe Maddox as well, of what are the best ways to engage and involve older citizens who might not be tech savvy, which I know, Rob, you mentioned as well as part of the test. So maybe if we go back and do the same again, maybe Rob and then Lucy as well.
I think it's using anything. Are we talking specifically within within online sphere?
I think maybe whilst we feel like we're limited in what we can do in face-to-face engagement, I think thinking of, we've got a lot of audiences that we may want to reach, people, for example, who are locked down in nursing homes and things like that. Is there something that we can offer them as an activity, but that online engagement is then a different barrier?
But I think if we're thinking about don't limit yourselves to thinking about what the user can accomplish. Think about what help they can get to access that technology. So if we use a nursing home example, why not have one of, so let's keep it simple. Let's say you're using Zoom. Get somebody from the nursing home to put Zoom up on a screen somewhere and have a number of people engaging with it. That person or that nurse or care assistant can then also interact on behalf of those people. So just because we're using technology, it doesn't mean that the end user has to be the one that has to adapt to technology. And I think, let's use the extreme example there. Someone in a nursing home probably isn't going to be possibly, not probably, let's use possibly nowadays, is not going to be interacting with the app either. So you kind of need to go out and find adopters people who can help those access to the technology. I think that's probably what I would suggest if people really, really struggle. But like I said as well, keep it simple. Keep the user interface. If you're using technology, use interfaces which look similar to other popular, for example, social networking sites, which I can't endorse. Social remain nameless, but go for something which looks and feels similar in feel to other things which are also popular.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Rob. That's really useful. Lucy, do you have anything to add before we sort of go into our creative session?
I'd just say, I think to get older people or non-tech savvy involved with City Nature Challenge, you can probably do it without tech at all. If you think of things like the Great Garden Watch weekend that's coming up, you can get resources through networks that exist even during lockdown, and then you can gather that data and you can input it yourself. So I think there are creative ways where you can think of reaching other groups, getting them to do an activity over a certain amount of time, and then you getting that data back from them.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So I think that's about the time where we need to wrap up. But thank you so much, Rob and Lucy, for setting a bit of context and helping with some of those ideas before we go in. I'll ask you if you can step off camera now. That would be fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you, and we're going. Also, just a quick note to everyone who's engaging in the chat. It's fantastic to see that a lot of you are answering each other's questions before the team or the speakers can get to them as well. So thank you, and do carry on with those conversations. We will be kind of saving all of that chat as well, so that we can see what those core questions and frequently asked questions are coming up. In the meantime, I just wanted to run through. So we've got about half an hour left of our time here, and what we wanted to do was, hopefully in your joining notes, you should have received a link to a program that's called Padlet, and one of my colleagues will drop that link again into the chat now as well, and we'll pin that in the chat as well so it doesn't get lost in the conversation. There we go. And what I'll just do is I'm going to ask Ellie to share her screen so that we can see what that page should look like when you land on it. You should still be able to hear me in the background whilst you are on that. If it should open in a new tab for you, or a new window. And so what you should be seeing is the City Nature Challenge UK programming Padlet wall here as well. It's got a few little instructions on there. But the challenge that I want to set to you all is to populate this wall. And you can navigate around it and move around with post-it notes, which are your ideas for taking on this task of how might we amplify and connect our regional programming to create a national program. What kind of activity is happening in Brighton and Liverpool that we could connect up and turn into something national? What kind of ideas do you already have in the pipeline that that could become something that we could all share and put together? Or what kind of narrative stories can we tie together at a national level to really help amplify what we're doing locally. If you're not based in one of the cities that is taking part in City Nature Challenge, and I know from our poll that we've got quite a few people who are kind of on the outside of those city boundaries, the plan is that as we did in 2020, is to have a UK covering project that allows us to keep account of everyone who is contributing wildlife records over that City Nature Challenge weekend, so that everyone has the opportunity to take part. The data outside the cities might not contribute to the score of a city region in the international challenge, but people can still be part of that and can still enter their observations. And so how might we tie up some of that that activity that's happening outside of the city boundaries, but is still really valuable engagement and really valuable data to be collected? So I'm going to ask Ellie to quickly show us how we create a post-it note on this wall. And there are two ways. You can either double click in there, and then you type in a title. You can then add a little bit of extra text underneath if you want to. And then the other option for creating one is that you can click the pink plus sign in the bottom right, and it will create a post-it note somewhere on there ready for you to populate. So I'll just let Ellie add something on there as well. You can then drag that around. You can move around your own post-its anywhere on the pad. If you do click the pink button, it does appear sort of bottom left-hand corner of the whole pad, so you might end up having to scroll around. So usually just double-clicking is the simpler because it appears where you're actually putting it. And thanks, Ellie. So Ellie's now dragged hers back up to the top. And if you hover over it, you can see in the top right, there's a little menu appears. And you can click on that menu and it allows you to choose a different colored post-it note. We'll actually be using that later on. So if you can keep things white for now, that would be really helpful. And you can also actually, via that menu, you can add things like links and Google image searches and all kinds of other things. So if you wanted to have a play around with any of that, then you are very welcome. So the idea being that we want to kind of put on as many different ideas and activities on here as possible, and so there's about 85 of us in there at the moment. It may be slightly more actually. Maybe people, the count may have dropped down because of people moving across to Padlet. But so within a fairly short sort of 10-minute brain dump, we should be able to really fill this with, you know, if everyone puts in 2, maybe 3 post-its, we should have a really chunky lot of ideas to work with. Don't worry at all about duplicates, and don't worry about having to read every other post-it before you put in your idea. Also, don't worry if it sounds like a bit of a silly idea or a crazy idea, or, you know, something that would take huge resource in order to pull off. Often those are the ideas that then spark into things that are both realistic but also really interesting and innovative and new as well. And we can see from Ellie's screen there just how much is already popping up into that space. So I'm going to give us another 6 minutes before calling time on that, and we'll kind of do a next bit. But if everyone can throw in 1 to 3 ideas, we should have a really good chunky number of ideas to work with. If you're struggling with anything in Padlet in terms of, you know, your things keep layering on top of each other or getting lost, then Ellie is in there to help manage things, can shift things around and pull things back into place as well, if anyone's having a challenge with that. And if you are finding Padlet a little bit tricky, or there's something that's not working for you, then you can mention in the chat here as well. And I know Stu is online and will be able to hopefully troubleshoot for you a little bit in the chat as well. But hopefully it'll be working for everyone. We did take a little bit of a risk on not being quite sure what the maximum capacity of people logged into the same Padlet wall was. So it looks like we haven't crashed anything yet. So that is quite useful. Liam, I can see on you've got how do you get into Padlet? So there is a link just at the top of the chat there that says we'll be using Padlet to share programming ideas, and that should take you straight to the Padlet wall as well. So if anyone missed that little bit, the link is pinned in the stage chat as well. Yeah. Oh, and Stu's just redropped it in there as well. Fantastic. So this is we're seeing a huge response, which is great. I love the sound of Blossom Watch. Fantastic. And we've got some really useful kind of questions and things coming up here as well. Four days of live stream content from across the country. Oh, things are moving around. There's so much coming in here. Fantastic. So I'm going to give us 2 more minutes. So final ideas to articulate. And then I'll give you task number 2, which could get messy. So we'll see how we do. Good. Glad you managed to get in there, Liam, as well. But it looks like most people have managed to get in and add some ideas. You can see them appearing live. Padlet, by the way, really useful program. There are many alternatives as well, but we found it quite a nice, easy access and simple solution for replacing the big bits of paper, Post-its and Sharpies that we would normally use to bring all of these ideas together. So loads. So final minute, final ideas. Oh, there's lots that kind of drop right down to the bottom there, aren't there? So if everyone, so you should only be able to move around your own Post-it notes, except for Ellie, who can who has the master power across all of them. But if everyone wants to kind of try and pull them up so that they're all in reasonably close together, so that we don't have like ideas that get left off the bottom. That might be helpful as well. But as you can see, what Ellie has done there as well is that if if you're a PC user, you can press the control button and scroll out to kind of just scroll at your browser so that you can see more of the page as well. Although you obviously need to scroll back in to be able to see what they actually say. Okay. So we've got a really good cluster coming together. I'll just let Ellie help tidy up a little bit and start pulling all of those back up towards so that we can see them all in one place. But if everyone wants to move themselves in the Padlet and go sort of straight to the top left-hand corner of the Padlet wall, so that everyone is kind of seeing the same sort of thing, just while Ellie moves all of those things up. You should now see a big collection up in that top left-hand corner. And the next task that I'd like to kind of crowdsource with you all is to start looking at those Post-it notes and starting to arrange them into clusters. Now, this is where it might get very messy with lots and lots of cooks in this particular kitchen. But I think that we should give it a go anyway, because this is derives from an exercise that's that allows us to. We would normally do this silently anyway, where we would want to sort of pick off one of the Post-it notes and move it into a cluster. Ellie, can I just check as well if Ellie? I just want to check that this is going to work. Can people move each other's post-it notes, or can people only move their own?
Yes, they should be able to move all of the post-it notes.
Excellent. So that's really helpful. Thank you, Ellie. So what we can do is, if you can pick a post-it note, move it into a reasonably empty patch of Padlet wall, and then start to look for ones that will that kind of go with it, so that we're clustering ideas into groups. There might be some duplication. There might be some things that feel like they are linked or come together in some way, but it's actually quite useful that we would all not necessarily all put things in the same group. So do feel free to kind of move things that's already into a group and maybe you feel should move into another group. And it'd just be great to have sort of 10 minutes of where we're looking at each other's ideas and trying to cluster them into areas that make sense together. And Ellie, if you can sort of be part of that process as well to help to kind of pull things together which may have got left in obscure corners of the Padlet as well, just to make sure that we don't lose anything. I can see already people starting to cluster things as well, so we can see where things are. But it's so he's got a kind of bit of a cluster starting to emerge around schools engagement here as well. We've got, there we go. And so Ellie is going through, and in with purple post-it notes, Ellie's going to just start giving those things some rough titles, so to help us bring things together as well. So as I say, in the Padlet, just gathering things together in groups that seem to make sense. And this isn't an exact science. There's no right or wrong answers necessarily. And this is kind of clustering by committee. And just as we've had a question as well about someone having trouble getting into Padlet as well, is that we'll be able to share this. We'll keep this Padlet accessible after the event as well, so that people can get in and have a look. There are download options as well, but it's kind of, it can be a bit difficult to read when we're looking at something this big if we download it as a PDF. So, but we will share the links so that so that people can find this kind of thing. And so as these things start to fall into clusters, hopefully we'll start having sort of 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you know, some groups that start to make sense as things that might lead us into some ideas for how we might take things forwards. And what we're going to be doing is, with all of these suggestions that we get pulling together, is we will have a really deep dive into a lot of this after the event as well, so that we can reflect back some of those ideas and identify some of the areas that are worth potentially pursuing and as putting some collaborative time into to explore ways of making some of these things happen as well. If you're finding that there's a cluster that's starting to get quite a lot of groups into it, you know, if it's starting to get more than kind of 15, 20 post-it notes around it, it's probably that there's 2 ideas in there that need teasing apart. So it might be worth trying to split one of those groups as well. Ellie, as well, if things are getting a little bit packed in to a particular place, if there's a kind of a wholesale move of a group as well into an area with a bit more space, that might work as well. And do feel free that you can spread to over to the right as well, not just up and down in there. Okay, and then what I was going to suggest that we do next, so we've got this group starting to come together, and that's really helpful. The next phase of this session, so we've started to pull these things together, was actually, you've been able to put out your ideas in there. You've also been able to say some things in the chat, but it'd be quite nice actually for you to get to speak to each other as well. And we do have set up in the sessions area of the workshop, we've got some breakout groups that we can let you loose in to be able to share your own cameras, join similar to a Zoom call and things that you'd be familiar with, so that you can discuss some of the things that are coming out in here whilst still adding to the Padlet as well. And one of the things that would be really helpful whilst you're in there, and we've kind of kept this for the last sort of 10 minutes of this session before we go into a break, but of course you're sort of very, very welcome to carry on in the Padlet during that break, is to, in the top left-hand side, and Ellie, maybe if I can interrupt you to take us to the top left corner, we've got these three coloured Post-it notes: rose, thorn, bud, pink for rose, blue for thorn, and green for bud. And what would be great is if you have comments to add to the existing ideas and things that are on there, is you can either add comments at we have it set up so that you can comment on the things, or you can like the existing things, so you can kind of vote on your favorite activities with the like button. You can see the little heart on the Post-its, but also what you can do is you can put in a coloured Post-it note. So for something that's a positive advantage bit of feedback, this idea has a really positive thing that you can see on it, hit a pink for rose. If it's something that you can see there being a particular challenge with, or a disadvantage, something that this idea won't deliver on, you can do that with a blue. And obviously always thinking of that as being very constructive. Don't be offended if your idea gets a blue. It's more about pointing out where it might not be able to perform, but also having advantages elsewhere. And then a green Post-it would be a bud, so something that has potential. Is there something that just needs extra that's needed to take this idea and turn it into something really, really strong? So you've got a couple of options there for how to feedback on some of the ideas that are coming together here. You can either add just a like to a comment, or you can add a little bit more detail with the rose, thorn, bud feedback. But what I'd like to do is encourage you all as well to so keep your Padlet open in a separate tab, and then in a few seconds when I direct you, is you can head to the sessions on the left-hand side, which will take you out of this stage area, and will take you to selecting one of the groups that are there. Do try and spread yourselves out across those groups, because only up to 20 people can share their camera and microphone at the same time. So don't feel like you need to all go into group one. Do spread yourselves out across. It might be but you can still view what other people are talking about in there if there are more than 20. So do feel free to spread yourselves across those first across those sessions. So if everyone wants to head towards those sessions now to have a little bit of chat about this, we'll then have a 10-minute break starting at past. So sort of using the last 10 minutes to continue to work with this, then have a good 10-minute stretch. We'll then come back and we'll go straight into our sessions space, where there are fireside chats. And this is an opportunity for you to, again, have that face-to-face chatting as well, and discuss some of the points that have come up through the conference so far. I'm going to go quiet now and let everyone move into those session spaces. But thank you very much. We'll see you back.